Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Prithvi Bandaru. Welcome. Let me give you a little bit of the rundown of the good news that we're going to talk about today. We're going to start off with COVID. And listen, I know, COVID's all around us. We're always talking about COVID, but it's mostly surrounding us in a pretty negative way. It's mostly surrounding us in a way where we're focused on the negative effects it has on our life. And I have a couple stories to show you that humans are a product of their circumstance, and with the right mindset, regardless of the challenges that we face, we can find a way to make the best out of a situation. I guess that's what this podcast is really about. Not only directing your attention towards the good news, but potentially giving you an avenue to rewire how you view news that you get, and giving you the tools that you need to turn anything that happens to you into a good situation, like some of the stories that I have for you today. So we're going to talk about COVID. We're also going to talk about the environment. There's a lot of stuff going on in the environment, a lot of positive stuff, a lot of positive strides being made, and I think I want to bring those to light, and I want to show you guys that the Earth isn't going to explode. We have a shot. We just have to do some work. So that's going to be really fun. I've also got some kind of obscure stories for you. Some free swimming lessons that are happening in Nashville. Listen, I know that doesn't sound too noteworthy, but what these swimming lessons are doing is pretty fun. And then I've also got some stuff about therapy and MDMA, and that's going to be fun. And I've also got a segment for you called Good News from Around the World. So that's where I'm going to find a lot of good news that's happening outside of America and bring it to your attention, because I think there's some beautiful things happening all around the world. And then finally, we're going to end the show with a top 15 list of ways for you to reduce your carbon footprint, a top 15 ways for you to help the environment, to do your part. So stay tuned for that. All right, so this first story, it's about coming of age during the pandemic. And I'm 21 years old, and it has been really, it's been hard, but it's been very unique in its own way to grow up in a time where you can't do everything that you necessarily thought that you would be able to do during this time. I didn't imagine that when I turned 21, I would be in my basement having a drink with a couple friends. I thought I would be out, but that wasn't the case. But there was beauty in being able to hang out with my friends, just like we have been doing for years and years, and kind of reflect and be like, wow, we have come pretty far, from being 10 years old to being 21 years old, and still kicking in the same place. That was a really cool moment, and there's much more dramatic moments that I'm going to tell you. But of how people my age and people a little older than me, some younger than me, found a way to inspire themselves despite circumstances. So, for example, I've got this girl, Hannah Green. She was about 24 years old, and she, much like me at the very beginning of the pandemic, she finally moved into her own apartment. And I say finally because she was homeless for a long time due to a history of sexual assault as a victim. And at the end of the story, she ends up writing a book. But let me tell you how she got there. She says that when people ask her where she's going to be in 5 years, she's confused because she honestly has no idea. She said that she never even thought she would make it to 24. And I'm 21, right? And if you ask me what I think I'm going to be doing when I'm 24, that's just 3 years. I have no idea. I fully have no idea what I'm going to be doing when I'm 24. I don't even know what I'm doing next week. And I think that's really reflective of people my age because eventually you find out that planning is helpful, but sometimes it's futile. And if you stick to a plan regardless, you could end up taking steps backwards instead of steps forward. So rather, Hannah Green, she rolled with the punches, and whether she did that because of a lack of other options or because that's the mentality she had, regardless, rolling with the punches is what helped her. So she's actually been a survivor of abuse for many, many years, and she didn't talk about it for a long time. Rather, she turned to drinking and she turned to drugs in order to numb the pain and suppress the thoughts that she had. And this kind of led her down a rocky path, and it led her to, like I said, homelessness. For over a year, she was homeless. And then she started to come on the come up when she joined a political campaign in 2019. She met a bunch of people that were able to support her, and people that were able to relate to her and help her out and find her sobriety. So finally, in February of last year, she moved into her first apartment, which is actually around the same time that I moved to my first apartment. And then, as we know, everything closed down. And so she found herself lost. She found herself a little confused because she had all of these resources that got her to where she is. She finally has an address. She finally has a roof over her head. And all of a sudden, she's cut off from all of that. She doesn't really have any avenue to access that. And so she began to articulate herself because she found that what got her in this sticky situation to begin with was the inability to articulate herself and that habit to suppress whatever she was thinking. So she articulated herself, and it doesn't matter how she did it. She did it through a tweet, which is how I also articulate myself, except I have less profound things to say. But she was later contacted by someone about this tweet. So she tweeted about homelessness. She tweeted about her struggle, and she was contacted by someone, and they asked her to write an article. Essentially, they just asked her to further articulate. And this article really spoke to a lot of people, and it even appeared on the BBC. And it really is just an article about her articulating her trauma and how she was able to strengthen her own self-esteem. So Hannah Green, she even spoke at a couple of centers for homelessness called the Center for Homelessness Impact. It's an organization that takes a data-driven approach to tackling homelessness. So they're using numbers, they're using statistics to be like, how do we solve homelessness or at least help these individuals? And they offered her a job there, so now she had a job. And she worked as a lived experience specialist. And I think that's just a fancy way of saying she was someone who has gone through similar things and is able to help each other, and is able to help other individuals. And so her role was pretty much taking her real experiences and making sure that they're at the heart of the research that is being conducted by the Center for Homelessness Impact. And I think that this is a job that should be implemented from the top down. Someone to make sure that whatever bigwigs, whatever smart people are conducting this research, are doing it in a way that is authentic to the problem that they're trying to solve. Because more often than not, I find that this research is coming from a good place, but it's misdirected because they don't have a direct connection to whatever issue they're trying to solve. And so having this lived experience specialist that Hannah Green was working as is a way to keep the research grounded in the truth and in reality rather than getting caught up in the numbers, because that is a drawback of this data-driven approach. Because tackling homelessness is a humanitarian problem. It's a humanitarian crisis. And when we try to solve those with numbers, sometimes that humanity can get lost. So rather than getting lost in the perils and the loneliness of quarantine and of lockdown, Hannah Green, she decided to further articulate herself. So she wrote a book. She wrote this book called My Journey Home, and people say that it's a pretty difficult read, honestly, because it's real. It's a real articulation of what Hannah Green went through. And you can buy it. It's on sale now. It went on sale in April. And she articulates her own story and doesn't try to funnel a narrative into it. She just uses a human story of homelessness behind the judgmental headlines and impersonal data, and she kind of meshes them together in a way for everyone to understand. So this is a great example of how, not despite circumstances, but because of circumstances, individuals like Hannah Green are able to take what life gives them and turn it into something. And it's clear that this isn't an ability that everyone is born with, right? Because Hannah Green wasn't born with this ability. She struggled with it initially. It was something that she wasn't able to do. But she chose to work on herself and find a route that would work for her. And it ended up in this beautiful articulation called A Journey Home, or My Journey Home. But humans aren't the only ones affected by COVID. Actually, the environment really affects the way that COVID is spread. So we actually can look at past pandemics, like the yellow fever outbreak, and understand some of the patterns that the environment and temperature plays in the role of spreading infectious diseases. So we know that temperature, rainfall, and humidity actually tend to have really profound effects on the spread of disease. So if we actually take a look back at the summer of 1878, the southern United States, it was hit by a pretty catastrophic outbreak of yellow fever. So yellow fever is a disease that's transmitted between people through a specific type of mosquito. We know mosquitoes are awful. They don't do much except for give us bumps in the summer and I guess kill almost 100,000 people during the year of 1878. And that's actually how many people were contracted with the disease, and about 20,000 people lost their lives. And if you want to put it into money, the economic costs that the yellow fever outbreak of 1878 had was about $200 million to the economy. And so yellow fever is actually pretty common in the 18th and 19th century, and by 1911, there were significant improvements in rainwater storage, specifically in sanitation, that got rid of a lot of the place that mosquitoes were breeding and a lot of place that the mosquitoes were making home. And this had a huge impact on the spread of the yellow fever virus. But it actually would take until the end of the 20th century before scientists even realized why outbreaks were so much worse in some years than others. So if we go back and we look at the year 1793 and between the year 1793 and 1905, that's a huge range. There were 9 devastating yellow fever epidemics, and 7 of those coincided with El Nino, which is a band of warm water that develops off of the Pacific coast of South America every about 4 years or so. And so the phenomenon results in high rainfall, warm springs, and hot summers in southern U.S. states. And apparently this is the perfect conditions for diseases to spread. According to research, in 1999, this provided the most specific perfect conditions for this specific type of mosquito to spread yellow fever. But you're thinking, Prithvi, where's the good news? Why are you telling me this? This is sad. I am sad. Okay, but let me tell you, that there's not actually any specific evidence to why climate change is playing, or if climate change is playing any role in the coronavirus pandemic. But there is an intense debate about a possible role of different weather patterns playing a big role in the spread of diseases. So, according to a report by the World Health Organization, the receiver of the most improved or most valuable player award for the year 2020, they say that climate change, one of the global environment changes now underway, is anticipated to have a wide range of impacts that occur of infectious diseases in human population. And there is concern that a change in climate is going to bring more viral disease outbreaks. Like, I'll tell you this, I live in Chicago. It is May. It is late May. And we're just starting to get nice weather. Usually we would have gotten nicer weather by the end of April, maybe early May. But up until last week, it was cold, it was rainy. I swear to God, we got snow last week in the middle of May. It was sad. It sucked a little bit. But now we're getting some drastic weather changes. And actually, the weather in Chicago today reminds me so much of the weather that I'm talking about. It's hot. It's a little sticky. Like, these diseases are gonna spread if they're going to. But let me tell you the actual good news. That recent technological advances mean that scientists are able to develop and manufacture diagnostic tests, vaccines, whatever, at a speed that would have been unthinkable even a decade ago. Forget 1878, even a decade ago, this wouldn't have been possible. So however slow and frustrating this response to COVID-19 feels, just know that it's cutting edge in reality. Realistically, it would have taken 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine of this level 10 years ago. I just got my second dose the other day. I feel pretty good. I don't think the microchip has kicked in yet, so I still feel pretty good. But 10 to 15 years ago, we would have had to wait 10 years. Or 10 years ago, we would have had to wait 10 to 15 years for a vaccine. And so that ability to problem solve so quickly and mass produce these vaccines is really a testament to how well prepared we were for this spread, despite the weather, despite the humidity, despite the fog. We were able to come to combat this vaccine, and I think that's cause for celebration. But if you stick around for this next segment, I'll tell you why the future is looking even better, because despite whatever temper tantrums the weather is throwing, we're equipped, we're ready, we're getting ready to fix the world from all the damage that we've caused it. So if you stick around, I'll tell you some of that good news.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hey, welcome back to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Once again, I'm your host, Prithvi Bandaru. We just left off talking about COVID. Specifically, we were talking about how there is a relationship somewhere between weather patterns and COVID and the environment and COVID. So let me tell you some more good news that's happening as far as the environment goes, because honestly, whenever I think about the environment and the future of climate change in the environment, it does get me down. But I found a lot of cool cool stories that are hinting at a brighter future, at more of a bright spot as far as climate change and the weather goes. So yeah, I said that I'm in Chicago, but I found this story native to the GSMC network. California recently hit 95% renewable energy. And okay, yeah, that's a little bit of a clickbaity title. But for approximately 4 seconds on April 29th, California got 95% of its power from renewable energy. And that's with California using about 90% renewables in the afternoon hours during a period of warm, cloudless weather. So these are very, very specific conditions that California was able to generate 95% power for 4 seconds. And 4 seconds may not seem like a lot, but it made a huge difference, and it actually signals some progress that we're experiencing. So honestly, there's a couple more caveats to this 4 seconds, 95% power. First of all, didn't include Sacramento or Los Angeles. Okay, those are two pretty big cities, ones that take up a lot of energy and a lot of power. But regardless, California is a big state. Even excluding these two cities, 95% renewable energy is incredible. That it still means that for these 4 seconds, over 29 million people were contributing essentially nothing towards climate change as far as electricity specifically is concerned. Okay, so it seems like I'm giving you more and more caveats, but think about it. 29 million people using electricity, but essentially not contributing anything towards climate change for 4 seconds. All right, but how did we get 29 million people to not contribute anything towards climate change while still using electricity? And the answer is solar power. I feel like we should start to call California the Sunshine State instead of Florida, because 95% renewable energy just from solar power. And that's why those clear conditions, no clouds, super sunny day, that's why that was super important. Because if it was any other conditions, that 95% wouldn't really be possible. I don't even know if any of that renewable energy would have been possible. It might have been very minimal, but it's because of the solar power that 29 million people were contributing nothing towards climate change with their electricity. And so this clean energy counter, as they're calling it, it also didn't include the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. And okay, there's another caveat, but at the moment, that nuclear plant is producing nothing more than steam as emissions, because they combine it with geothermal, hydroelectric, and biomass production, and therefore 100% of the state grid was occupied with these specific renewables during the daylight hours. So this geothermal, hydroelectric, and biomass production are coming from this nuclear power plant and are generating renewable energy and energy to begin with. However, this wasn't included in the 95% statistic. But the organizer, the president and the CEO of the California Independent System Operator, his name is Elliot Mainzer. He said it sends chills down his spine, because the types of transitions between going from no power to power were pretty rough. And yeah, I'm in Chicago, but everyone heard about the blackouts, the rolling blackouts that were happening in California. Inconvenient and honestly pretty scary. And so these transitions were pretty rocky for some time. And what basically Mainzer is saying is that this helps smooth the transitions of blackouts and possibly even prevent them going forward. He even urged the state of California to construct another 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy. And this is equivalent to 1/8 of the entire state baseload's power. And this is so that we can cover the gaps in the grid that lead to the rolling blackouts last year. So basically, if I can explain this, it's 100% covered under the nuclear plant, but sometimes there's gaps, and those gaps are what result in the blackouts and are what result in the power surges and that unevenness. And so these forms of renewable energy, their purpose is to bridge those gaps so that there are no blackouts. And so covering these gaps in renewable input is, okay, it's mostly important for two reasons. The first is that electricity is kind of the only resource that has to be consumed as soon as it's produced. What does that mean? As much as I would like to say that it's possible, you can't physically capture lightning in a bottle. There's nowhere to store it. So as soon as it's produced, it has to be used. And so it doesn't come down to, how much energy can we produce? It's how much energy can we produce that needs to be used, because we're not trying to make more energy than we need. We're trying to make just as much as we need in order to prevent a blackout and to prevent a surge. So it's kind of finding that perfect balance. And the second reason is that fossil fuels are by themselves a form of storage. Renewable energies, most often they have no form of storage, and the electricity that they generate goes into the grid immediately upon production. So that's the closest thing we have to storage, is the grid. And so to help navigate around like the flaws in renewable energy, the gaps in the grid, whatever, California specifically has been a pretty key leader in working to establish renewable energy that's consistent and dependable, and also coordinating with other states, because California realizes that, although it is a huge state, not enough change is going to happen if they are the only ones that are working to produce this renewable energy. And so they're working with other states in the West specifically to share this surplus of whatever power they're producing across state lines. And that would honestly help so many states if we could almost replicate this form of producing renewable energy and distributing it. If we could replicate that in other places across the U.S., our use of renewable energy, and no matter how much we produce, is going to be more efficient, because we're able to allocate those resources to wherever we actually need to, and we're not going to have a surplus anywhere else. We won't be overloading the grid. We won't be underloading the grid. And so, okay, let me give you an example of this allocation. California, obviously way more sunny than Wyoming, gets a lot more rays. But Wyoming, in comparison, has the most consistent wind power of any state. So therefore, utility companies in both California and Wyoming are exchanging on the basis of covering the baseload power with the strengths of the other. So they're helping each other out. One state is giving the other sunlight, and the other one is giving each other wind. And that's pretty interesting. We're now able to trade nature. We're able to allocate resources wherever they need to go. And I think that's pretty interesting, and it offers such a wide array of solutions going forward. And going forward, it's really important to remember that this seems a little mad scientist. Say, let's move the sun to Wyoming. How can we get it there? Let's take all the wind and ship it off to California, where they could use some wind. But it's not just the wind, it's not just the sun, it's what's coming out of them, it's that renewable energy. And so it's important to keep in mind that until more cost-effective and scalable storage technology for this renewable energy is more widely implemented, this bartering system, this grid system, is probably the best method for protecting against blackouts and drops in supply due to changing weather. Because it's that unpredictableness of the weather that's kind of resulting in these blackouts, in these gaps. So the more that we can fill these gaps, the more that we can help ourselves out, we can help other states out, and we can finally start to combat climate change. And that kind of goes back to the story at the end of the first segment, where we're like, okay, well, we're kind of at the mercy of the weather. There's no one specifically with the weather to get mad at, right? There's no chief chancellor of weather where you're like, hey, come on, man, like, Why is it mid-May and it is snowing? There's like, yeah, you can get mad at the weatherman, but he's just a messenger. And so using these this renewable energy transportation type system is the closest that we can get to controlling and reverting the climate change back to how it was before, a healthier version of the Earth. And that connectedness to the Earth is something that people were really reminded of when we were sent into lockdown. At the beginning of COVID, I don't know about you guys, my mom has always been a gardener, and I thought she had a green thumb, but once COVID happened, I swear to God, her whole right arm turned green. It's because she was pouring herself into her garden. She was pouring herself into her landscape, into her lawn, whatever. Maybe because it was for fighting for a sense of control in a time where it didn't feel like we had that. Or maybe it was this feeling of creating something, of investing yourself into something that you know is positive. So last March, this panic, kind of a lot of people were looking for gardens and were looking for the same maybe sense of control, for the same ability to impact the environment. And so this idea of Airbnb for gardens started. It's all thanks to this app called AllotMe. And it's for people who are in more dense urban areas where you're almost fighting for spots to have a garden or allotments where you can grow, where those spaces are more limited. And so this app AllotMe, it just launched. It was made by this guy named Conor Gallagher, and it's a digital platform. And it's pretty much just, like I said, Airbnb for gardeners. It allows people who have green spaces that they don't really use to rent them out to people who are desperately seeking for a place to grow. They're like, it's kind of that same idea with California and Wyoming. They're like, hey, I have all this garden space, but I don't need it. Do you want it? And these guys on AllotMe are like, yeah, give it to me. I need some carrots in my life ASAP. And it's kind of that lending that helping hand. And I think this was a really beautiful idea by Mr. Gallagher. So the first plot that was listed on the platform, it was in Gallagher's own backyard. And it was kind of echoing the Airbnb's founders who were the first people to post their homes on the site. They were like, hey, we need people to like people can use our home, we're not using it. And Gallagher was the same way with his own backyard. And so Gallagher himself, he kind of only recently got into gardening. You know, he plunged his hands into the soil for the first time only a couple of years ago, and he kind of fell in love with it. Not only for its mental health benefits, but also for the impact that it was having on the earth. And he saw that, and he identified the pandemic, the panic at the beginning as a perfect time to launch AllotMe and be like, hey, try out this gardening, try it out, see what kind of wonders it does for your mental health, see what kind of wonders it does for the earth. And so this community has actually grown an incredible amount. There's already more than 1,000 people on AllotMe, and there's also a waiting list currently for AllotMe because I guess there's more people looking for spots than there are spots, and that's awesome. So many people are ready to garden. So many people are ready to have that green arm, and so even Gallagher, he admits that the demand for plots is currently outstripping the supply. You know, and that's always a nice problem to have. There's not enough space for all the people that want to help the earth.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast. I'm still your host, Prithvi Bandaru. Earlier in the show, we were talking about COVID, how there are actually some positive things and some inspiring stories that came out of people's reactions to COVID based on their previous experiences. And then we transitioned to how the environment is really affecting COVID and COVID affects the environment. And we were talking about how there are some bright spots as far as climate change goes and as far as our response to climate change. And now I kind of want to switch gears. I found that when I was compiling and I was going through and finding all of this good news, I was finding a lot of good news that was coming from outside of America, outside of the United States. So I wanted to compile some of that and share some of those with you. So this first one, it takes place in Italy. As COVID-19 restrictions are kind of lifting, as countries are looking for ways to attract more tourists to their destination, they're brainstorming. They're looking for innovative ways to kickstart their respective travel industries. Even so, places like Portugal, they were building remote worker villages. And as 1984 as that sounds, it's actually a lot nicer because they were closer to resorts than they were like worker factories or something like that. And part of that is because it took place on this like beautiful island called Madeira. And now Italy is kind of copying that model, and 2 Italian towns are paying 50% of the rental costs for remote workers looking to swap wherever they're currently living for this slice of medieval Italian rusticity. These towns are beautiful. So one of them is Rieti in the Lazio region, and the other one is Santa Fiora in Tuscany. And so both of these are kind of older medieval Italian towns. And yeah, they're willing to pay 50% of your rent just for you to work there rather than working at home. So who knows? Maybe next week this podcast is going to be coming to you from Rieti in the Lazio region. Because actually both of these towns were having trouble not only attracting people to these towns, but keeping people here. People were maybe coming for like a weekend. People were coming maybe for like a day, a week, something like that. But they were looking for more long-term guests. And also another thing that they were looking for is younger guests. So that's why they were targeting this program towards younger people that are looking for a new place to work remote and stay there for extended periods of time. So these two cities, there's 2 requirements that essentially you have to meet in order for you to be able to live here. You have to be able to prove to Santa Fiora and their mayor Federico Ballocci that you are, 1, a full-time remote worker. So it can't be part-time, and you have to be remote the whole time. You have to be able to prove that. And 2, you have to sign on for a stay greater than 2 months. And yeah, it kind of sounds like that one Scooby-Doo movie where they're like, hey, come stay at this island. And then everyone at that island was getting terrorized. I hope it's not like that. It sounds beautiful. It sounds the opposite of that.
They describe these towns having medieval walls, that kind of older Italian aesthetic, Renaissance piazzas, Baroque palaces, vines, vineyards, rivers, local markets, chestnut forests. It's definitely your typical European experience, and rather than visiting it, you get to live it. You get to pretend like you're a local. Like whenever I travel somewhere, my goal is to not look like a tourist. Every time I'm going somewhere, I love to pretend like I know what I'm doing. I think that's the way to go about it. As soon as people can identify that you're a tourist, they've lost respect for you. Nothing is worse than having people lose respect for you that you're never going to see again, and maybe never even talk to. But hey, you can pretend to be a local for 2 months in either of these places. And so you're wondering, okay, well, these are some old Italian towns. How optimal is it going to be for me to work there? Well, both of these towns come with high-speed fiber optic internet, so you won't be breaking up on Zoom, and all of your emails are going to go through. But something that makes me confused now when I think about it is, well, I guess my work schedule slash sleep schedule is gonna kind of be messed up, right? Because all of my coworkers are on at a certain time, and now I'm gonna have to get up at 4 a.m. so that I can hop on the Zoom call and show my presentation. But I guess that's the price to pay when half of your rent is being paid by the mayor himself, and you get to kind of explore Italy. But I guess that also works in its favor, right? Because then you have the rest of your day, like your normal day, to go and actually experience and live and do that normal stuff. And you can work when everyone else is sleeping, whatever. That could actually be a really interesting 2 months. And so there's actually also some investment opportunities involved with this. The mayor Bellocci, he's offering about 30 lakhs, about a 30 lakh grant for people looking to open up bed and breakfasts, hotels, little motels, wherever for people to stay. And honestly, this seems a little desperate, but hey, this would work, right? This should work. He's also willing to provide childcare assistance. Because he's aiming for young people, right? But maybe not all young people can afford to uproot their life. Maybe the only people that can afford to do that are older people that have children. And so they've provided some childcare assistance. So I think this is a really unique opportunity. And so this other town called Rieti, it's super small. It has a population of about 50,000, and it is also witnessing like this lack of travel, lack of tourists. And so it's inviting remote workers to bring an outside perspective. And it really feels like you're in a Roman town, apparently. So it's an hour and a half away from the eternal city of Rieti, and it was founded by an Italian tribesman before Rome controlled all of that specific peninsula of Italy. And so for employees, to get approved, you need to have a letter from their boss confirming that you are, in fact, a remote worker with enough hours and enough pay for a minimum of a 6-month rental. So this is for this outdoor town of Rieti, for a minimum 6-month rental. And self-employed folks kind of only need to give a detailed description of their work and some proof of income to secure rent assistance. So really, you could if you have the funds to justify it, you can kind of make up your own work and be like, hey, let me come and kick it in Italy. Thanks for paying for half of my rent. So this is some good news that's happening around the world. So Italy is kind of looking for people to come, and they're providing incentives for working people that are going to stay there long and are going to contribute to their economy, that are going to contribute to their tourism. All right, and I've got another story for you that takes place in India. So if you're not aware of what's going on in India right now, they're being hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. This new wave that has occurred in India is some of the harshest that we've seen around the world so far. Just last Wednesday, India's coronavirus deaths crossed 250,000. So things are pretty dire in India. It's considered the deadliest 24 hours since the pandemic began, and it's only increasing, with overall cases surging past 23 million just this past week. So the problem that's occurring in India is they don't have enough resources and enough workers, beds, oxygen to get to all of the people that need it. And even if they have it, even if they have, the beds, the oxygen, whatever, it's hard to get it to these people. And in a last ditch effort to get oxygen to her father, this woman Ramya, she got an auto rickshaw. So in India, they have these things called autos, and it's kind of like this 3-wheeled car. It's mostly yellow, and the way it works is there's one guy in the front, and the steering wheel kind of looks like a motorcycle steering wheel. And there's only one wheel in the front and 2 wheels in the back. And they're super common in India. They're pretty much like taxis. They're pretty much like Ubers. You flag down an auto and you say, hey, can you take me here? And they say, yeah, and then you pay them. It's as simple as that, but it has 3 wheels, and it's super fun, and it's super small. So she flagged down one of these autos, and in this act of desperation, she was like, hey, can you please deliver this oxygen cylinder to these families in need that need them? And to her surprise, this auto driver, within an hour after she had called, and this auto driver has supplied oxygen to Ramya's uncle, who eventually was able to find a hospital bed because this oxygen kept them going. And so this was really seen as a kind of groundbreaking opportunity. And it spread to local cyclists, other people who had cars. They were going around and helping and delivering this oxygen across India. So it kind of started as this grassroots volunteer movement, and it's helping tackle this new wave of coronavirus in an incredible way. So there's been a shortage of ambulances. There's been a shortage of hospital beds, drugs, and oxygen, and it's really crippling the healthcare that India needs. So India is a country of 1.3 billion people, and that they didn't have enough supplies to get to everyone who needs their help. So there's one group called the Relief Riders, and they're just auto drivers, and they have this cool name, and it's auto drivers and a group of cyclists called the Relief Riders, and they've expanded across 8 cities. Including some huge ones like Mumbai, Bangalore, and they use algorithms to match delivery requests with nearby volunteers. And they said that in the last 2 weeks, we've added volunteers. And in the Bangalore city alone, they have over 200 volunteers or relief riders that are transporting this oxygen, transporting these drugs to people who need it. And I think it's beautiful that it's dangerous to be out there in India right now. It's pretty dangerous, regardless of if you have a mask. If you are able to get a vaccine, which is incredibly rare, it's pretty dangerous to be outside, especially interacting with people, delivering things. But these people are prioritizing the health and the well-being of other people who need these resources more than anyone else. And they're saying, okay, what can I do to help? Who needs me? And so they're going and whatever they have, autos, cycles, whatever, they're delivering oxygen, they're delivering drugs, and it's beautiful. And these people are stressed, but they're doing it for the betterment of the community. There's a testimonial from one of the riders. He said, "We have limitations, and it's difficult to say no to people that are desperate for help." But he also said, "Who's going to run away from this challenge? If we run away, our community dies." And that's a beautiful sentiment, I think. He said that we often park ourselves outside a patient's home, give them oxygen per the doctor's instructions, and then we wait for an ambulance to arrive. And it's their way of being there for them. If they need anything else, they wait for the ambulance to arrive. They say, okay, if the ambulance doesn't get here, if you need anything else, you let me know, because that's what I'm here for. These are strangers that are going up and helping other people in India, because this is one of the biggest humanitarian crises that are going on, and they've recognized that every little bit helps, because not only are they running out of hospital beds, they're running out of places to bury people, they're running out of places to cremate people, and these people are stepping up and helping. So let's give a quick shout out to the relief riders, and best of luck to India going forward in dealing with this issue.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast. I'm your host, Prithvi Bondaru. Okay, so we started off today talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and how a lot of the coverage surrounding the pandemic is negative, as it should be, but there are a lot of people who have weathered the storm and come out on the better side of this situation. And we look to them for inspiration and for ways on how we can better ourselves and change our own mentality when it comes to facing problems and making decisions. And then we transition to talking about the environment and climate change. And that's a bit of a theme of this episode, is talking about how there are some significant strides being made as far as the environment and climate change goes. Like California recently, for 4 whole seconds, hit 95% renewable energy, meaning that about 29 million people weren't contributing anything as far as electricity goes, to climate change. And then we also talked about how there are Airbnbs for gardens with this app called Allot Me, where people are looking for places to garden, and so they find people who have spaces but don't necessarily garden and use their space. And finally, we had our good news from around the world segment, where we looked at the globe, and we said, okay, where's the good news coming from? And we learned about some beautiful towns in Italy who are paying people to come there and work remotely. And then we also talked about how Indian drivers, whether it's bike riders or auto riders, are providing some vital resources for the COVID-19 pandemic to people across India. And finally, we've arrived at the last segment, the top 15 ways for you to reduce your carbon footprint. So let's get into it. The very first one, carpool. This is an age-old one. We've been carpooling since elementary school, and it's the perfect way for you to determine who you can and cannot spend time with in a closed environment. I mean, what better than a carpool? You're trying to get somewhere. Your only obligation when you're in the car is really to just sit and be. And sometimes it's really hard to sit and be with certain people. And so a carpool is a great way. It's a great litmus test for you to see whether you can stand some people or not. Because you never have less patience than when your knees are by your chest and when another person's thighs are touching your thighs. So carpools are the way to go because they're going to reduce that carbon footprint. You're taking less cars. You're having less patience. It's perfect. Number 2, public transportation. I don't really know how it is in other parts of the country, but here in Chicago, using the CTA, the public transportation, it's the perfect way to answer the question, are you experiencing a lack of unknown variables in your life? Are you trying to get somewhere either 15 minutes early or 30 minutes late? Well, you should use the CTA because sometimes you might get on the CTA and then you'll have to get off immediately because something's wrong and you're going to have to find a great way to make a decision. It's a great way to force you to make decisions on your feet. Also, the CTA, it's reducing your carbon footprint. It's essentially like a bigger version of carpooling with the whole city. So you're getting to know your city better, you're getting to know the people in your city better, and you're helping the earth. What more can you ask for? Number 3 on the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint is paper straws. All right. Okay. So we know plastic straws, they're bad. They're destroying the turtles. They're beefing with the turtles. And plastic, yeah, it's killing wildlife, and it's taking years upon years to decompose this plastic. So why don't we use paper straws? Some of these paper straws, they're made from recycled paper. They're made from recycled other things. But the paper straws, it's a fun way to see how much of your saliva you can taste with whatever you're drinking. Because with these paper, after like 4 sips, like the tip that you were using to suck whatever you were drinking, it kind of gets like softer and the hole gets narrower. And so by the time you're at the end of the drink, you really have to like really work that straw, see what its potential is, so that you can get, because it's small. It's actually the perfect way to make spitballs, because the straw becomes the ball of spit, if that makes sense. And then number 4, metal straws. Metal straws, it's the solution to paper straws. Are paper straws too disgusting for you? We'll switch to metal straws. Because it's also a great way to get your iron and copper supplements, because that is what you're going to be tasting while you're drinking. So whatever you decide to drink, just know that you're going to get some good copper, you're going to get some good iron. That taste is going to be in your mouth all day. Don't let it get too hot either. You can't really use metal straws outside in the sun because that's going to heat up. It's going to burn your lip. But nothing tastes better than helping the environment. Number 5 on the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint is reusable masks. And it's the reusable masks. They're great. You know, you never have to throw away masks. You never have to use different ones. You never have to wonder, oh man, I'm out of mask. No, you're using the same one every day. And it's also the best way to reuse yesterday's upper lip sweat and condensation on the inside of the mask. Have you ever put your mask away and you're like, all right, yeah, there's a lot of sweat on my lip. I wonder how much got on the mask. Well, the next day you'll be able to find out, because those sweat stains are going to be visible. Isn't that fun? You get to visually track how much the pandemic is ruining your acne. But reusable masks, great way to reduce your carbon footprint. It's a great way to be smart during the pandemic and take care of the environment. Okay, so number 6 on the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint. How about composting? Okay, so we learned about composting, and I'd say about like 4th grade or something like that, and I didn't really understand it. They were like, hey, are you done eating your banana? Give me your banana peel. And I said, okay, great. I don't have to walk to the garbage. And they said, no, we're going to put it in this soil over here, and it's going to smell awful. Like maggots and larvae are going to get in there, and they're going to break down this banana peel and turn it into usable, rich soil. And so it really is the easiest way to justify littering. Do you have a banana peel and orange peel that you just throw it? It's easy. You're immediately composting. It's a great way to justify it. But you wonder, okay, the maggots and the larvae, that's kind of gross, right? That's kind of disgusting. Doesn't it smell awful? But that's the whole point. It lets people know that you're environmentally conscious. Isn't that the point of it all? Because what's the point of being environmentally conscious if you're not getting the daps for it, if people aren't recognizing you for it? And so that smell from the compost is going to be what you need to get you that recognition. Okay, so number 7 on this list of the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint. Eat less meat. Okay, so you guys might have heard this, but cows, where we get our meat from, they fart methane. And the methane from these cow farts are extremely harmful to the ozone layer, and it really impacts the balance of these greenhouse gases in the environment. And so how do we stop cows from farting? Well, we can't stop cows from farting, but we can reduce our intake of meat, because the production of meat itself also releases a lot of carbon emissions. It's pretty hard on the environment, that whole process. And so, yeah, if you're eating less meat, you're helping the environment. And it seems tough, right? It seems tough to cut out the meat, but it seems even tougher to try and reverse the effects of climate change that we've experienced so far. And so this seems like a relatively easy way to do that. Okay, and if eating less meat isn't your thing, I've got a better one for you. How about you eat less veggies? Okay, we're all struggling for food, and that the animals are no different. When you're eating veggies, you're eating their food, and it's a little rude. First of all, it's a little rude. And so eating less veggies, it's going to leave more food. It's going to leave more supplies for wildlife. But your question is, okay, I'm leaving this food for the wildlife, but what's the point? I can't eat it. You just told me to eat less meat. Okay, yeah, that's true. But it seems pretty selfish to eat their food when they don't have any other food. And so that's number 8. Number 9 on the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint is plant a garden. Just like that allot me from earlier, planting a garden is really going to help the environment, and it even, like I said before, is a great way to help you feel control over something. It is a good way to help you feel control over something, because you'll eventually learn that, okay, I'm watering this too much, I'm underwatering this. No matter what I do, it seems like this plant is struggling. But it's that process of working, getting to understand the plant, that is really satisfying. And that's from personal experience. I have a succulent, and I have to water it every 3 to 4 weeks. And that's pretty confusing. That's honestly really hard for me, because it doesn't feel like I'm actually taking care of something. It's like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot you existed for 4 weeks. Here's about 3 inches of water for the next 4 weeks. Have fun. See you in a month. So yeah, planting a garden is fun. It'll be a good way to help the environment, and you'll be saving money because you're making your own food. You're growing your own food. So yeah, sure, you might be eating tomatoes the size of grapes, but you grew it yourself, and that's something. Nothing tastes better than some self-satisfaction and some hard work. Number 10, reduce single-use plastics. So what does that mean? There's certain plastics, like plastic bags, whatever, that are single-use plastics. You can't get any use out of them after the first time. So switch to double-use plastics. Do you have to throw away that plastic bag, or can you sneak it back into Target and avoid that bag fee charge, that plastic bag fee charge? You can do that. That's reusing. That's reusing, reducing, and that's recycling. And honestly, it's helping your wallet too. Number 11 on the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint: bike. You should bike places. Your calves are going to thank you. Listen, biking is the best way to get your calves on X Games mode. Okay, and if you've ever wondered what it felt like to be as close as possible to a moving car without dying, biking is your chance. You don't know how many cars, the rear view mirror or the side view mirrors of a car, it'll be inches from your shoulder, and you'll feel alive. And you'll be alive because you're saving the climate. You're saving the environment. Number 12 on the list of top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint: take shorter showers. Okay, this is I feel hypocritical saying this, because I'm a huge fan of long showers. I take long showers all the time. I'd say my showers range anywhere from, I'd say 15 minute shower is a pretty short shower for me. they're normally like 25 to 30 minutes. I feel bad saying that out loud, but that's the reality of the situation. So I'm also working on taking shorter showers. And this is my solution to taking shorter showers. If you struggle to take short showers, this is your solution. Only wash one part of your body each shower. Okay, and so we'll divide it up into 7 parts so that by the end of the week, your whole body's clean. Okay, so how are we going to divide this up? We'll go face on Sunday, right? We'll go left arm Tuesday, left arm Monday, right arm Tuesday, left leg Wednesday, right leg Thursday. Okay, and then we've got Friday and Saturday. We'll go front of the torso. We'll go front of the torso on Friday, and we'll go back of the torso on Saturday. Boom! By the end of the week, your body's fully clean. And you're thinking, okay, I feel like by the end of the week, like, my face is going to start to smell bad because I washed it on Sunday, and it's Friday, and I'm supposed to wash the front of my torso, not my face. Well, this kind of goes back to that composting idea, because you're going to smell worse, but people are going to notice, and that's the whole point. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, good. We're helping the environment, but people know I'm helping the environment, and that's what I really care about, right? Number 13 on the list of top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint: drive a hybrid car. We have a hybrid car at home. It's like a Lexus or something like that, and it's silent. It sounds like this. It sounds like that's what it sounds like all the time. Like when it's driving, it doesn't really make that much noise, and it's kind of cool. So hybrid cars, aka the silent killers of climate change, and it reduces on paper too, because you're saving money. You're saving money. You're reducing on paper. Number 14 on the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint: unplug your electronics. Okay, and this sounds hard, and honestly, I think it is one of the hardest ones to do on this list. Because when I finish binge watching my favorite show at 4 a.m, I'm not going to remember to walk over and be like, oh, okay, good, time to unplug the TV. But it's worth doing with a lot of things, like unplugging your charger when you wake up in the morning. Super helpful. Unplugging your laptop when it's not charging. All of these things are going to help reduce how much electricity you're using and how much electricity you're taking up. And it's also going to reduce your bills. And if we want to take a note from hybrid cars, you're saving on paper. You're saving on paper, and that's all. And that's what reducing your carbon footprint's all about. Finally, number 15 on the list of top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint. How about you plant a tree? How about you plant a tree? It eats up all of your CO2. It produces all of your oxygen. It's you and this tree, just going back and forth, exchanging CO2, exchanging oxygen. And it gives you the best reason to plant a tree is to give yourself privacy. If I could plant just a massive tree outside my window so that my neighbors can't see into my room. Okay, because currently my room, the window faces the master bedroom of the house next to me. And that's just an awkward situation for everyone involved. So if I could just plant like a huge tree right in between our rooms, that would be perfect. My windows would be able to be open. I could come into my room after a shower without having to worry about scarring, my neighbors. That would be great. So that's the top 15 ways to reduce your carbon footprint. This has been the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast. I was your host, Prithvi Bundaru. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was a bright spot in your day, because it certainly wasn't mine. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you guys next week. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.